Okay, welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist podcast and video. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And, we do a lot of different topics on the Compassionate Capitalist podcast. We talk about, best practices for entrepreneurs to grow your business. We talk to angel investors about, how to be a better angel investor, how to identify trends in the marketplace. We talk about industry specific. And then sometimes we get the opportunity to talk really big picture and big ideas that if you take the time, and you might need to listen to this twice and you need to go to my guest website, but you can shift your paradigm about the possibilities when you understand how the world is an integrated place, and I do a lot of economics conversations, and we talk about scarcity of resources, or the recent podcast was talking about how the urban renaissance, and how by uplifting communities that have been decaying, you can grow the overall GDP of a country, because by helping a whole other group create incomes and property values that become another tax structure. You don't have to do all the other funny around. You just create more sources for people paying regular taxes, right, as a way. So those are all kind of like the people resource thing. But when it comes to technology, when it comes to those kind of resources, we find all too often, particularly in a capitalist society that is not truly a free market. People argue for free markets, but we have this sort of sometimes this sense of scarcity. And so we've got to hold on to what it is we have, because if we lose that, then, we lose our ability to prosper. And then there's a different kind of philosophy that says, no, if we use our technology to create ample amount of resources so that there is no scarcity, then what can you do when everybody can rise to obtain their full potential, and they're not having to fight for the scarcity of resources? And so my guest today, Cameron MacPherson, he can wave and say hi as I get ready to introduce him for those that are watching now. Fascinating what he has developed, which we call the next giant leap. And there's way too much to cover in one podcast on this. And I have a feeling I'm going to be bringing him back on as different things develop in our society, because, this is a manifesto, if you will, of what is the potential of the human condition if we come together in what he is describing as collective capitalism. And we'll get into that in a minute. And it's through the next giant leap. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, and then we're going to come back. I'll tell you it again. It's just really simple, nextgiantleap.org. Okay? Let me tell you about Cameron. So Cameron is a technologist, a futurist. He was passionate about social advancement. He's an enterprise system analyst and software developer by trade. That's his day job. But he leverages his academic background in political science to develop the new systems that blend technology and philosophy to address the challenges from a very unique angle. And that's the next giant leap. His primary project is what we're talking about, the next giant leap, which promotes an open source blueprint for systems that can solve resource scarcity and climate change. The next giant leap proposes solutions to these issues, and this whole blueprint for the system, the universal energy that can accomplish this task by deploying the best energy technologies we have available in the framework, designed to work cooperatively from the ground up. And that's just a piece of it, because it goes all into all different other aspects of that we're going to talk about now. But without further ado, I want to bring Cameron on and say hello to everybody. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thank you, Karen, for having me. It's great to be here.
So, okay, system analyst, software developer by trade. This is big picture stuff. How'd you get the idea because it's well researched. how'd you get the idea to do this? What was your motivation? Because this is clearly something that you weren't paid to do. It is a point of passion for you. So tell our listeners about what led you into this passionate endeavor to promote this manifesto for the next giant leap.
You know, and it's funny that the way you phrased it, because you really hit the nail on the head with pretty much exactly how it works. And what kind of motivated me to do it was a mixture of you know, some humanitarian focuses, insofar that a lot of the problems in our world are resource driven. And a lot of the causes for conflict and war and a lot of humanitarian maladies are resource driven. And that, that kind of reality that we contend with, as nations, as people, as a species, all on this planet, is kind of juxtaposed with the fact that, we don't really have to be doing that. Because technology kind of really gives us a way out. When we think about the amenities we have in our society, we have smartphones, we have smart TVs, we have smart appliances. We don't really have a smart energy grid. We don't really have a smart resource production. Everything is kind of just contrived and thrown together rather arbitrarily for how it's been since, the start of the 20th century. All of our models aren't really geared to embrace a lot of the advances that we've been experiencing over the past, even 30 to 40 years. Most of our power infrastructure is pretty old. It's pretty antiquated. It uses a degree of technology that needs replacement. Uses a hodgepodge of fuels and power sources that all have to be extracted from the ground, and it's kind of put rather randomly. And a lot of what this project is designed to do is to bring our energy and resource production to the 21st century and to integrate a lot of the advancements that we've made within information technology and material science and communication and ability of precision of manufacturing to build kind of provide blueprints in which how we can take the best technology we have today to kind of solve these long vexing problems that have, plagued us for some time, and use them to basically build a platform for a better state of existence for, for everyone in a collective sense.
Yeah. So there's so much discussion going on right now about, energy's always been sort of a topic of conversation, and even when it comes to, access to clean water, and we talk about, we're going to have an infrastructure plan and we have to rebuild our infrastructure because it's so old. That there's something that that you said that I guess I got it off your website. And so at a high level, there are 4 types of renewable energies, but also to address water conservation and management in the process, and addresses the infrastructure, challenging the cities and municipalities that face our decaying infrastructure, contaminated water, and power consumption in high density areas, and those with the opposite challenge in a sprawling low density. So talk about how your blueprints will address to how to develop this circular economy that can fuel itself from, indoor farming, as I said before, not everything we can cover on this particular show, but ocean cleanup, so much more, almost too big to be true, but you kind of have to start big with a vision, I guess, to shoot for the stars, land on the moon. But talk about how that integrated model can solve so many problems within a community.
Sure. It starts with the energy question. So the first challenge is, how can we generate enough clean energy at a low enough cost that we can synthesize resources? And this comes from 2 general approaches. The first is by leveraging renewables, specifically within municipalities and public infrastructure. There's a debate about the effectiveness of solar panels and wind turbines, for instance, but much of this debate hinges on, the cost and the materials needed to make them. Because when solar panels and wind turbines require a comparatively high volume of material to make, and they aren't necessarily carbon neutral just to manufacture them, because they take a lot of energy to make that happen. And, you know, to solve that, and also furthermore, you need a lot of land to deploy them on, and land gets expensive the closer that, the area of deployment is to like a city. Buying, 500 acres outside of New York City is, hyperbolically expensive, much less so than it is in, say, like, the center of Nevada. But, delivering energy from Nevada to, say, LA or New York City is, prohibitively difficult and prohibitively expensive. So the first strategy is to leverage municipal infrastructure. So that could be canopies over roads. It could mean government buildings. It could mean bridges. It could mean any sort of land that is owned by a municipality that doesn't need to be purchased. It's close to a city. And deploying renewables in that area specifically using public funds. Because through that vector of deployment, what you have is you have cascading cost reductions, that you don't need to buy land. You don't need to worry about a lot of the deployment logistics that you have to do if renewables are deployed over like myriad land terrain mass. You can kind of standardize renewables to fit over infrastructure in a way that can be plugged not only directly into a grid, but also kind of provide a redundant grid for that municipality. The second approach is using clean nuclear. And nuclear power kind of gets a bad rap in our society and through the world, through waste, and because you can make weapons from it. Long story short, most of these concerns hinge on reactor designs that were made in the 1950s, primarily because it was the first we invented, and second, also because the past approach to nuclear energy was used to make nuclear weapons as a byproduct. It's very difficult to make weapons grade plutonium, for instance, without using uranium in light and heavy water reactors. So that's kind of been the way that we've done it, but new technologies come out that have allowed us to make reactors very small, small modular reactors that can be built in an assembly line, much in the same way we build an airplane or a vehicle.
Okay.
Because when you have a big, honking hefty nuclear power plant that's to be built to order, if we look, for instance, at the Watts Bar plant in Georgia, that it's been $10 billion and counting. It's been 10 years and counting, because every last little piece of it has to be made to order, engineered to order, designed to order, and built to order. And all of the expertise in permitting and architecture and regulatory compliance and financing and underwriting and insurance, everything from A to Z on that, when you have one plant, has to effectively be started again from scratch for another plant, which has made deployments of these large baseload energy facilities extremely expensive. So by mixing clean nuclear that is kind of made on in an automated, modular, and standardized capacity, in the same way that, say, a Toyota Tacoma is built on an assembly line, you can create an abundance of energy that critically provides a carbon neutral method to manufacture renewables. So you put renewables in cities and other municipal infrastructure where, again, you don't need to buy land, and you can have a more standardized means of deployment, and it can be bought with public funds. So it can really, really dramatically reduce the cost of implementation. Paired with clean nuclear, you, on one hand, dramatically increase the volume of energy available in a given instant, while facilitating a corresponding decrease in the cost to manufacture that energy. And where that comes in is renewables kind of can help provide a lot of the immediate energy needs of any given region, with clean nuclear providing the second. But because nuclear is particularly hot temperature-wise, it has some important side benefits, which comes into kind of a mindset called cogeneration, or combined heat and power, which is becoming more vogue in the energy industry, not just within the U.S. But also abroad. Where the long and short of it is, you use the waste energy of one technology to power the functions of another. Right. So, say for example that you have a clean nuclear power plant fueled by the element thorium, which is not uranium, well, not directly at least, which is very clean. It's a liquid, so it can't really melt down, and it's very difficult to make weapons from it. And what you can leverage that reactor for beyond just energy production is using its, very high temperature heat exchangers to preheat seawater for desalination, for instance.
Okay.
So rather than a very energy intensive process to, turn salt water into fresh water, you just use the waste heat and just counterflow the influx of salt water through the heat exchangers of the reactor, and it's basically boiling by the time it gets to the desalination facility. So it's practically energy neutral. And even further from that, you can also take that excess heat and extract hydrogen from that desalinated water, kind of using that salt as a little bit of an electrolyte, as a catalyst to, extract hydrogen from it. So in one facility beforehand, you just had one giant nuclear power plant. Now you have modular swappable nuclear reactors that also produce hydrogen fuel and fresh water as a byproduct, which solves kind of the tertiary problem. And this is really the core of how the framework of universal energy works. Because you can desalinate an effectively unlimited volume of seawater, and when that seawater is desalinated, it flash turns to steam and it's condensed, it's hot, it's at high temperature, you're able to basically pump an unlimited volume of seawater through above ground pipelines next to highways. Again, state owned, don't need to buy land, pre-cleared of obstructions, and they're flat and they're straight. So, highway medians are not really used for anything. So they're just kind of there. And in fact, they cost money because they have to be mowed and so on and so forth, but they go for thousands of miles. So you can put above ground pipelines on these, our massive highway infrastructure. And you can put solar panels on top of these pipelines, and you can put small hydrodynamic turbines within them to create artificial electricity for effectively an indefinite length. And when you have a certain volume of water, say something as large as 500 billion gallons, you can use that excess. You can use that excess energy that pipeline array generates to keep that water at high temperature. Now, water, if you've ever heated up a cauldron on your stovetop, say like a bunch of water or soup, it stays hot for a really long time. Water has unique properties that allow it to retain heat very well. And if you keep that volume of water hot, say 500 billion gallons, going back to that figure, that can present a stupendously large battery for all intents and purposes. Unlike a regular battery that requires, say, a chemical reaction to facilitate a charge, what such a large volume of hot water can do is it works as a thermoelectric battery, and that can store the effective energy that you can use through thermoelectricity at night to basically invest all of the energy generated by renewables to this system. It's called the National Aqueduct, and it's a piece that ties all of them together. It's not really magic. It's a lot of renewables, a lot of clean nuclear that makes renewables clean, not just in manufacturing, but also disposal, and it's tied together through a very large volume of cleanly desalinated fresh water. And that's it.
So that's sort of the core in and of itself. And is that that really is what makes up the circular economy that fuels itself within
Well,
obviously all that stuff creates jobs and things like that, but when electricity is virtually free or something, then that frees up resources that people would spend other stuff on. Or how does that address, or because I think you cover it, all of these aspects, but the rest of the economy side of things that integrate with that and solve the problems of hunger or of living wages, let's say, and those kind of things.
well, sure. But it's not that necessarily provides collective capitalism in a circular economy. It's what provides the platform to build those two things.
Okay.
So, strictly speaking, the other two pieces that this kind of this platform of hydrogen fuel that's inexpensively produced to effectively indefinite scale. Same with fresh water. Same with electricity. It allows us to grow food indoors in vertical farms in cities. To effectively any extent desired. You could have thousands of such farms if you wanted. And what that allows you to do is, you can grow say, hydrocarbon producing algae and other stuff for biofuels, which can be used to make novel plastics and polymers. Along with such a large volume of energy, you can also make more advanced materials like high strength thermoplastics or uh, carbon-based substances like graphene or boron nitride nanotubes and other very, very high strength synthetic materials that are far stronger and far lighter than aluminum or steel or many of the things we make today, and can be made, can be synthesized effectively indefinitely. So you also have food, and then you also have materials. And what that allows us to do with all of these pieces in play is we can mass manufacture things on a very high level of precision that also allows us to think beyond kind of the old economy of like take, make, use, dispose, and throw away to make, use, reuse, remake, and then recycle, and so on and so forth. So something, let's even something simple as recycling today, or waste management. Well, that's landfills, ocean trash. It becomes a problem. If you have a tremendous volume of energy, you can power something called plasma gasification. And what that does is it creates basically an electric current to incinerate waste at a super high temperature that reduces it to its base elemental composition, and also kind of extracts any biological material thereafter in something called syngas, which can also be used as a low carbon fuel. So when you have that much energy, you're able to solve huge problems that are now very vexing. Like how do we get all the steel to make to repair aging infrastructure? How do we where do we find all the land to bury all this trash? How do we source all the fuel to create this, to solve this problem? How do we get all the water to provide for agriculture? By providing that basis of energy and fuel and water, all those problems are solved, and they can be solved with a rather modest investment on the scale of what we spend on our military budget for a few years. On that scale of investment, we can make these kind of critical resources, water, food, electricity, fuel, and building materials, indefinitely abundant and effectively free. And that doesn't necessarily make anyone rich. That doesn't necessarily provide this idea of collective capitalism in and of itself. But what it does do is it can drastically reduce the costs of living that a lot of people pay, and the main cause of poverty. If everyone has food, water, shelter, and housing, no one is poor. You may not be wealthy, but you don't really need anything for your biological existence. You're able to live and thrive. You don't have to spend 30% of your income on food or resources or fuel. You have that. So everyone becomes 30% richer, even if wages stay as they are, immediately out of the gate. And there's also, kind of coming back to this idea of collective capitalism, this idea that everyone now has more disposable income to not only invest in the society's economy, but also themselves and also their children, and also ventures that they think are worthwhile. I mean, when we look at a lot of financial publications, wealthy people always say invest. That's how you get rich. Well, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't really do that. But if you had if your cost of food and fuel were dramatically slashed, you would.
Yeah.
And you would not only have that ability to invest in things like securities, but you could also invest in a side business or a venture or a creative application that you think is worthwhile of your time. And that creates a force multiplier of the capabilities of everyone in society, and has these kind of cascading effects. When we think about something like crime, for instance, I can't really predict with certainty that crime would vanish if such a system was in place. But when we think about how much of crime correlates with poverty, it's hard to imagine a circumstance where it wouldn't reduce, drastically, because people aren't committing crimes out of need. There's no more, how do I feed my kids? There's no more, oh, I lost my job, I lose my housing. There's a whole lot more of a capital basis that we can use to invest in ourselves collectively.
Yeah.
And that starts by providing that, that abundance of inexpensive energy, which is then used to provide that abundance of inexpensive resources.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it back to collective capitalism, because I think that that's a key concept that people can wrap their heads around. It's really seeking to use the technology, the innovations that you've been talking about, that therefore provide this basic floor of resources at a low cost that allows the municipalities, the governments, or the benefactors of that to focus on other things that they can, and the families and within that community that, as you say, in effect have a cost of living increase because they've now have taken some of their uh, baseline monthly expenditures and shifted it to nothing or to almost nothing. So I think you said it's the burden from the externals of scarcity and supercharged by the ample supplies of resources that everyone can use to build, discover, create, and achieve. And I just think that's that collective. So talk about how this is, because it's one of those things that, is this something that a community has to do replace everything and start all over? It only goes into the things that I talked about when we're doing, redevelopment of an area that has been economically decimated. How can people, academics, politicians, how can they take this great new giant leap and figure out how to put it into their current need and start to build from there?
And I'm kind of glad you asked that. Uh, and when you mentioned earlier when we were starting the show, you said it's kind of a manifesto, and I could see how it might come out that way at first, but realistically, it's software, and it's blueprints. It's software that provides blueprints, and because it's designed to solve resource scarcity by creating abundant resources, the software in and of itself is designed to be a resource for abundance. So it's designed in a way that when you read it and go through it, if you like an idea, take it. Nothing's patented. You don't have to pay for it. It's open source. It's designed for a policymaker or a business leader or a community to say, I like this. I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to make it mine. And you can. You don't have to ask my permission or anyone's permission to do it. You can go and say, you know what? Absolutely. I live on the coast. A water desalination using the waste energy for any of the power plants we have. This is our 5-year energy plan is to do that, then upgrade to, say, a small modular reactor. And let's talk to the Department of Energy and get talking about that. Maybe I don't have that reactor right now, but I can integrate some solar panels.
Yeah.
And I can then use kind of that small approach to creating a medium-sized vertical farm. None of these technologies are pie in the sky or while the model is forward thinking, the standard approach is just more of a strategic deployment of energy technologies. Instead of looking kind of, oh, we need a power plant, let's just build one. It's how can we leverage our power and our municipal resource infrastructure to create a much more cohesive system. So anyone can take it and it can start small. And while it's big picture, it can start massive. And because it's kind of software, you can use it to work for you. And if you look at like how software works, I mean, look at an application like Adobe Photoshop, for instance. You can edit photos, you can touch up photos, you can make new images. You don't have to use it for one or another. It's a toolkit. And that toolkit allows you to create things with it. What the next giant leap in universal energy is they're a toolkit for anyone to be able to invest in their own society by using these strategies and these blueprints to adopt and to create for their local needs. And I am extremely confident because these technologies work, and intelligent system design has proven its mettle in every application it's ever been put in. Jet engines aren't contrived; they're engineered. An airplane, a car, a cell phone, a computer, they're all engineered. There's thought put behind it. Just taking that same model and putting it to energy shouldn't necessarily be a controversial thing. The only thing that's incredible about it is the fact that we haven't done it. And this project was designed to be, a very well-researched, very straightforward first stab at facilitating it. And there's nobody, least of all me, that's saying that it can't be extended.
Yeah.
If someone else would say, I like this idea, what if we integrated this technology using these same principles? Brilliant, lovely. Let's have that conversation. Let's run the numbers, and let's iteratively, provide upgraded versions of the blueprints, just like software, in that same exact method. And open source software runs huge segments of our world, and it works because it's kind of community updated, and people that are passionate about how it can make the world a better place put their time and effort and expertise on it. This is just version 1.0, but any part of it can be used now, and can be extended as technology adapts and evolves in the future. So you don't have to spend $500 billion to get started. You can spend $5,000 to get started. And
Really?
you can work big. It can work big or small and scale iteratively from there. Because this is something that I probably should have started off with earlier. The driving mindset of universal energy are concepts of standardization and modularity, and this idea that most people could never build a light bulb, if they had
Yeah.
to. But they don't need to. They just replace the old one and put a new one in. You want another light? Put another light bulb. A light bulb is a fairly complex piece of machinery, but
Yeah.
we don't care about that. Oh, my computer hard drive, is broken, and my headphones is broken. Well, we may not know how to build that from scratch, but we don't need to. We just replace it. And by deploying energy technologies and using our manufacturing prowess, to build technologies in such a way, it's, you want a new solar panel, swap it out. Want to add a new one on, put one in. And, down the line, from solar panels to nuclear reactors to hydrogen production infrastructure, to water desalination and delivery infrastructure, to vertical farms, to 3D printing and next generation metallic additive printing. All these systems can be built in a modular, standardized capacity to, dramatically, increase your capabilities to utilize them to build a better world.
Yes, yes. That would be the nextgiantleap.org. I want to encourage folks to go there. When you get there, you're going to see, the main content is on the first page. But then when you go and you click under, I guess, universal energy, you can get to everything. Like you said, software, it's all laid out online. You can also request a printed copy. It's very large. But you've got a future worth living, the different chapters, mindset, the renewable revolution, the thorium backbone that he talked about, this water and hydrogen that Cameron briefly spoke on. So there's, it's all laid out there in greater detail. And I want to encourage folks that are listening to this that you have influence within your local government. You are a member of the chamber, or you have a leadership role in, other companies. You're on the board of directors, or you're an entrepreneur that is trying to develop some sort of social capitalist product, social innovation that's going to solve one of the problems that you talk about, the hunger problem. Or you might talk about, all these countries that don't have reliable electricity at all. That you're trying to solve some of these problems. It's your own passion. Go to Next Giant Leap and take a look at the information that is there so that you can be aware, and then you can be aware of what the potential is, because Cameron really has researched the latest and the greatest of technology. And if you are somebody that is working on something, maybe you're in an academic setting and you're working on innovations in something, reach out to Cameron and talk to him about what you're working on, because we were at the threshold with what he's developed as a catalyst of things to come. And we have a lot of problems when it comes to our environment that we need to solve, hunger in our world, abject poverty in the richest nation. We have, the water. We are always dealing with contaminated water, lack of water. You go from drought to fire. You know, there's just so much that we're having to cope with in our society that this is worthy of a deep dive in, and spread the word. Okay, spread the word about this. Send the link to your House of Representative, your Senate, to your local city council, county commissioner. Send it to the president of the company that you know. Send it to wherever you are. Just share the word on this, and let's get this out into the community so people can start contributing to it. And this idea of collective, because we are all in this together, collective capitalism can be something that we come together to solve some of these really big problems. So Cameron, as we wrap up here, anything you want to share, and then your final thoughts?
Um, I can't really say if I'm very impressed, and it was a great conversation, and you've clearly gone through it, and you've clearly understand, you know, exactly how it works, and, you know, it's kind of its implications to build a better world. What I will say, just mentioning the print copy, if you go to nextgiantleap.org, and you click on print copy, the way that it's laid out in a book is kind of a logical format, with a lot of charts and graphs, and it's heavily cited, but it's, you know, things I did to kind of make it really accessible is, you know, it's large font. It's not written in a way that's, you know, like an academic paper. You don't need to have a technical background to read it and grasp any of these concepts. It's written for, you know, the layman, the average person. It's very conversational in tone, and it's designed basically to educate everyone on the capabilities inherent to what these systems do, because, you know, my background is in software. I didn't, you know, I'm not a nuclear physicist. I had to learn this stuff, and to understand it in a way that it's actually really not that difficult. And it seems a little bit difficult at first because it's a big complex system. The science behind it might be complex, but what it can do, just like a light bulb, you know, it provides that deliverable through this, you know, through this through the engineering and the machining that makes it possible. So if you do decide to check out the website, you know, consider supporting us by buying a print copy. And the color is definitely the best way to go, even though there is one in black and white, because it does, with over 200 color images, it does get a little bit pricey to print. And, you know, please get in contact with me if you have any feedback or questions. You know, what I really would like to do is kind of turn this into, you know, and take the open source software movement to energy and resources, and use it to, you know, really build a better state of affairs for all of us.
Very good. So thank you again. I'm so glad that we found each other and I was able to learn about what
Thank
you're
you.
working on. And I really hope that we're gonna revisit this as you get progress. Please keep me informed so I can, you know, we can have you back on in the future to share where somebody stepped up, or an organization or an entity or a community did. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to share it with my elected officials so that they are putting this in, because as they come to the table and they have these conversations, this is one more thing that can add some clarity and potential, and potential solutions, potential different way of approaching things. And, you know, together everyone achieves more, right? So
I agree.
yeah, thank you very much for being on the show, and to everybody else, and to yourself, Cameron, onwards and upwards. Yes.
Thank you, Karen. Look forward to talking soon.
Okay.